Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's class on Color Theory Basics. I'm your instructor, Adrienne Hodge, and this is a weekly recurring class with Michael's that occurs at 6 p.m. on Wednesday evenings. And starting in December, it's going to be just 3 Wednesdays a month, and it will be 3 1.5 hour long classes instead of 4 hour long classes. So I'm looking forward to that. And as Chanel mentioned, our classes recordings will always be available on YouTube the next day, so you can watch the playback. And tonight's class, we're going to be covering all the basics of color theory. So we'll be walking through a basic color wheel and talking about different color schemes. And then we will make a bunch of swatches using just the primary colors. Well, we've got one extra color other than the primaries and black and white here in this set. I saw in the chat before we got started here, somebody was asking if this applies to watercolors as well. We're using acrylic paint tonight, but you are welcome to do this with any paint that you have on hand. This can definitely be applied to to pretty much any type of paint if you've got primary colors and black and white. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to my tabletop view and go over supplies, and we'll get started. All of the supplies that we're using can be purchased at Michael's or on the Michael's website. Okay, so this is a 2-part class starting tonight, and so we can just take our time here and answer any questions that may come up throughout the class. And also, you would think that something so basic like this would not take so long, but especially things like mixing up these the grayscale and the color value scale here. It does. It's very time consuming, and mixing up all of these neutrals, it takes a lot of time. So this will continue next week, and we'll see how far we get. We will probably get to the point where we have mixed up our secondary colors and these value scales and some of our neutrals by the end of class. And we're going to talk about color theory in depth as well. Okay, so I've got a couple of paintbrushes here, nothing too fancy, so you don't have to have the exact same paintbrushes. I've just got a small flat brush and a small round brush here. They were listed which one specifically on the supply list. And then I've got this golden set of this primary set here, which comes with titanium white, Mars black, ultramarine blue, naphthol red light, benzimidazolone yellow medium, that's a mouthful, and then permanent green light. So we'll talk about those primary colors and how you can, work with whatever primaries that you have as we get into it in just a bit. So if anybody's wondering like, oh, I don't have those exact same red, yellow, and blue, don't worry about it. And yeah, the green is a little bit extra here in this primary set. Okay, so but that's what I ended up using for my little color scale right here. Right, and then I've got some canvas paper, canvas pad. Got this Fredericks brand from Michael's. I've got a couple of plastic palettes for mixing. I've got a couple of water cups. It's always good to have 2. And then I've got some paper towels. And I don't think I put a tape on the supply list, but in case I did, it's not a bad idea to have some masking tape or painter's tape from Michael's. And then I also put a permanent marker on here so that we can take some notes. But if you don't have a permanent marker and you want to grab some sketch paper or a sketch pad and a pencil to take notes off to the side, and you could even do this in a sketchbook if you had some mixed media paper or acrylic pad paper, or, whatever you have is totally fine. Yeah, substitutes are obviously welcome. I'm just gonna check the chat real quick, or let's see if we have any questions about supplies. Not seeing any. Okay. Yeah, totally fine to substitute with whatever you have. I actually could not find a Sharpie for some reason, so I grabbed a Posca marker so I can take similar notes. But I did get this Posca marker at Michael's, so substituting with more Michael's supplies here. All right, so if there are no questions about the supply list, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and show you a little color wheel. Okay, so let's just talk basically about the color wheel for a moment here. So can y'all give me a thumbs up? You can see my cursor, right? When I'm pointing to okay, yes, I'm seeing heads nodding. Thank you. Okay, so we have our primary colors here. So those are yellow, red, and blue. And you can see it here. We've got the primary colors separated off to the side. And then we have our secondary colors, which are the colors that we get when we mix two primary colors together. So when we mix yellow and blue, we get green. When we mix yellow and red, we get orange. And when we mix blue and red, we get violet. And then, depending on how much of either primary color we mix together, we're going to also end up with these intermediate or tertiary colors. So that's your yellow green, your blue green, your blue violet, red orange, and yellow orange. But I like to say, if you go into Home Depot and you ask someone at the paint counter, I need a blue green, they're going to show you 78,000 blue greens, right? There's a lot of blue greens out there. So when it comes to our tertiary colors and intermediate, that's kind of interchangeable, those words there. There's a lot of in between. So our color are like all the colors that are possible to mix together are, wide in range besides just what we see here on this color wheel. Okay, so then we have analogous colors, and those are colors that are in the same family. So you've maybe heard of warm colors and cool colors. So warm colors are all of these analogous colors like yellow, orange, red, orange, and red. Those are all warm. And then our cool colors are going to be everything from green, blue, and even blue violet, and violet would fall more in the cool category, although violet really kind of stands alone in a lot of ways. I heard somebody say recently, it was a student in my class who has actually taught color theory themselves, who had a great description about what makes a true violet, because that's something that people can often argue over, what is a true violet. And they said, they kind of use this analogy of like two parents. So if red and blue are the two parents and violet is the child, once you get it to a point where the child is really its own personality and is not taking on the personality of either parent, that's where you have a true violet. And I thought that was cute, and I liked that. So anyway, okay, so we're going to get into complementary colors quite a bit here in just a moment, but so I'll call back to this and see who is paying attention to this moment right now. So complementary colors are colors. Each primary color has an opposite secondary color. on the color wheel. So yellow is the primary, violet is yellow's complement. It is opposite on the color wheel, and that means that they are highly contrasting. Then we've got, oh my goodness, I did not mean to go back on my, now I can't get it back. Oh my gosh, y'all, this is from a completely separate class that does not apply to our class at all. And for some reason, I just accidentally tapped it. Using a slideshow with this color wheel from another class. Okay, so as I was saying, blue is the primary and orange is its opposite secondary colors. So blue and orange are complements, and then red is the primary and green is the secondary color that is opposite on the color wheel. So that is red's complement. So we've got yellow and violet, blue and orange, red and green. Those are our complements, and we will come back to those when we're mixing colors, and I'll have you a little pop quiz, see who was paying attention. And then we have our split complementary colors. So that would be yellow and then the intermediate colors around its complement. So yellow and red, violet and blue violet would be an example of the split complementary color scheme there. Okay, so when we talk about the word hue, this word hue here refers to the pure color. So we'll come back to that as well. Whenever we make our little value scale of a color, we'll put the hue right in the middle. So if we've got this value scale in our example, I did green, I put the green right in the middle. That was the hue. And then I added white to the green to make tints of green, and then I added black to make shades of green. But in this graphic here, the shades kind of just show up like slightly darker than the tints, but all you really need to know is tints are the light versions of the color and shades are the dark version of the color, and hue refers to the kind of the main chroma or color that we're talking about. Okay, so that is my very basic intro to color theory here. Do we have any questions regarding this color wheel and everything we just talked about before I stop sharing my screen and we get started with the I see someone's asking shade is with black. Yes, so we're going to add black to the color to get the shades of that color. Oh, and thank you, Chanel, for including a link to a color wheel that people can check out online. That was on a blog. You found it, heartandhedrow.com, for those watching on YouTube later. Or you can just search color wheel and you'll probably find a nice reference, but I'm glad to have the exact one. For teaching purposes, I try to use my own reference images quite a bit, but this one, yeah, I did find that on the internet many years ago, so I'm happy to give credit to heartandhedrow.com. Okay, so I see Diane is asking, complements are opposing or similar? Okay, great question, Diane. We're going to get back to that in just a moment and go all the way deeply into complementary colors, but they are opposites on the color wheel. So complementary colors are opposites, and I'll repeat that and go very in depth into that in just a moment. Okay, I would love to have a copy of the sheet you were talking about right now. Okay, and then we found the copy of it. Okay. Yeah, so just, Googling color wheel, you should find a lot of different examples of color wheels. Okay, and then somebody's asking, Carla's asking, please explain the split complementary. Okay, so we've got our complementary colors are the opposites on the color wheel, like yellow and violet is an example of a complement. And then a split complementary is just the tertiary colors surrounding the secondary colors. along with the opposite primary color. So we've got yellow and then red violet and blue violet as the example that's given here. So let's say we were talking about green, a color scheme with green as the primary. The split complement would be green, red orange, and red violet. So those are the tertiary. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting that totally opposite here. Red is the primary. So the split complement for red would be yellow green and blue green. Sorry, scratch what I just said a moment ago. It's been a long day, y'all. And then the split complement for blue, which is our last primary, would be yellow, orange, red, orange. So you're just taking the primary, looking at its opposite secondary color on the color wheel, and then just using the tertiary colors, the intermediate colors on either side of the secondary. Okay, we're not going to get too much into split complements in this color theory basics class over the next couple of hours here, but we are going to go very in depth into complementary colors and what makes them so special. So if we have any other colors about, or any other questions about complementary colors, hopefully I'll answer those as we get more into color mixing here. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and get back to my paper here. All right, so I'm going to move all this aside and get out a fresh sheet of canvas paper so that we can get started mixing up a new version of this together. And yeah, honestly, I kind of decided last minute to put that color wheel and color schemes up on the screen. Sometimes I will teach this without the use of looking at a color wheel, because guess what? We're about to make a color wheel. It's just not gonna look like that. But we've got our primaries and our secondary colors, and it would only take an extra minute to go ahead and mix up, like your red orange and your yellow orange, etc., all your intermediate colors, and then boom, you've got your color wheel. You can organize it, with triangles, you can organize it with circles, or you can do those pie slices. But we're going to end up with a lot of notes here to, that could easily be used like a color wheel in your sketchbook, instead of looking at an actual color wheel. They also sell those things at the art supply store, the little color wheels that you turn, the paper color wheels. Those are very helpful as well. Okay, so let's get out I did not include a link to that color wheel, but you can find, if you just image search color wheel, you will find plenty of examples of an image of a color wheel and some color schemes like that. So one time I've ever used someone else's reference image on these Michael's classes, and we gave credit to where I found that. I appreciate that, Chanel. I'm kind of regretting it now, the more I think about it, but it was heart and hedgerow, heart hand hedgerow. So that's the word heart, and then the word hand, and the word hedgerow, all starting with an H. H-E-A-R-T, H-A-N-D, HEDGEROW.com. So you can find that exact one. I definitely want to give credit to the source of that color wheel that I put up there. Okay, so I'm going to squeeze out a little bit of all of my primary colors onto my palette now so that we can get started here. So I've squeezed out a little bit of my yellow that I have in the set, and having trouble getting the lid back on it. Give me just a second here. And then I'm going to squeeze out a little bit of my blue and my red. Okay, let's talk a minute about warm and cool primary colors. So this set happens to have some very specific primary colors that maybe don't necessarily look like the primary colors in the set that you have. And that's something that I found is very interesting across different brands of paint in lots of different mediums. And I teach in lots of different mediums. I teach a lot of water mediums, watercolor, gouache, ink, do a lot of that in my in-person teaching lately. And we are using the Golden brand of acrylic paint here. That's what I put on the supply list. And this is a really nice little primary set. But the red that is in here is very much like a fire engine red. And you may have more of a magenta red, like a magenta pink. And they may all be labeled primary. Whenever I taught a gouache class recently, I had 5 different brands of gouache, and I just put them all out on the table and showed everybody in the class, just mainly to put their minds at ease that it's okay if your primary colors in your set are, different than the primaries that I'm using, or are different than what your neighbor may have, etc. And just showed them, like, look, in this bin I have right here of paints, these are all the primary reds across 4 different brands of paint. These are all the primary blues. And they were even labeled primary blue, yet one of them was primary magenta and one of them was primary red. One of them was more dark blue, like this ultramarine blue, and the other blues might be more of like a cerulean or a cyan or more of like a sky blue. And then the yellows can sometimes be really like a lemon yellow, or they might be a little bit darker. So if you think about like cool versus warm, and I know that may seem confusing because, yellow is warm, so how can it be cool? Or blue is cool, so how could it be warm? When you see the light cyan blue or the cerulean looking blue, the sky blue next to the ultramarine blue, the ultramarine blue just feels a little warmer. Or whenever you put the naphthol red, like I have here, this more fire engine red next to a magenta pink, the magenta pink might feel a little cooler, right? So if that doesn't make sense, then don't worry about it. But I'm just saying it to like put your mind at ease if your primaries look a little different. But how it really affects what happens is that our secondary colors are going to look a little bit different. They're going to skew more towards, one end of secondary, or one end of these intermediate colors than the other. Like whenever I mix up this secondary violet using this darker ultramarine blue, it's going to just, end up looking a little bit more like a blue violet. It's just going to be on the darker side. It just is. But if I was using, or I'm sorry, y'all, I am so sorry. My brain is not working the way I need it to at the moment. If I'm mixing up this red with this blue, since this blue is so dark and this red is so dark, it's going to give us this really deep violet. But if we were using a magenta pink and a light sky blue, then we're going to get a different kind of violet. Okay, so that's all I really want to point out there. So just, that's why it's good to practice this, just like with anything else. Color theory is something that doesn't, understanding color theory fully is not something that is going to happen in our 2-hour basics class here. It's just, we're going to talk about the basics. And like with anything else, you've got to practice a skill to be able to master it. So if you're still confused about color theory at the end of our basics, you're just a little bit further along in understanding it better. And the more you practice with lots of different types of paint, the more it will make sense. And all of these exercises that we're going to do across this class are going to really help, I think, in a lot of ways. Okay, so let's start with our yellow, red, and blue, and we're just going to paint a little swatch of each one. That's all we're doing. And my camera is really getting in the way of this long paintbrush I have here. So I'm going to scooch over a little bit to get out from under it. Okay, so I'm just painting a nice little rectangular swatch. You can paint a circle or a triangle or whatever you want your swatches to look like. You could even make a little pie slice color wheel if you'd like to. Okay, and then I'm just going to label that with the exact name of the paint that I'm using. So you may be using a different yellow than me. Hang on, I gotta concentrate while I write down this long word. Benzene midazoline. Midazoline. Yellow medium. All right. And then we're going to paint a swatch of our blue. And if you've got a couple of different blues or a couple of different reds or a couple of different yellows, paint a swatch of each of them, because paint is very interesting. Color is so fascinating to me. You can mix up a color on your palette and then paint it on your canvas, and it will look completely different. And then it can dry and look even more different. So painting little swatches is very helpful. So there's a lot of different things that get in the way of us interpreting color exactly the same as another person, even. Our cultural backgrounds, our age are things that can affect the way we interpret color. But one of the things that affects the way we see and interpret color the most is what is next to that color when we view it. So by just getting it off of your palette and painting a little swatch on a separate piece of paper or on a canvas like this is one very quick and easy way to just see the color differently. So if you take nothing else away from this class, know that color is a very tricky thing that can be misinterpreted very often for a lot of different reasons. One thing I'm doing kind of off screen that you might not see me doing, but is I'm cleaning my paintbrush very thoroughly before I go to the next color. If I'm not doing that, then that means my blue is already going to have a little bit of yellow in it if I'm using the same paintbrush. So I'm just painting the bottom of my cup, as I used to say when I was teaching younger folks or folks at paint and sip places. Paint the bottom of the cup to get all the paint off of the brush. And then I'm also just kind of swishing my paintbrush around with a little bit of water to get it nice and you know, coated on the paintbrush to load up my paintbrush with that color. Okay, so painting a swatch of this red and then painting the bottom of the cup to get it all off, and I'm labeling it with my marker that is already bleeding a little bit. That's my Napsol. Okay, so now let's start to mix these secondary colors together. So we're going to mix two primaries to get each secondary color. Oh, also, I just saw a question about the second part of this class. Thank you for asking that, Jackie. So since we have the holiday next week, I believe we are, yeah, we're skipping a week. So the next part of this class will be the last Wednesday of November, and you can, you know, sign up for that class where you signed up for this one on the Michaels website. So let me just check the time. We're about halfway through here. Okay, so we always want to start with the lighter color first when mixing colors together, and that is because the darker color will often absorb the lighter color, or the darker color will eat the lighter color, as I like to say. So I'm going to pull a little bit of my yellow off to the side into a separate area here, and then clean my brush again thoroughly, which I know it's, a lot of effort to clean our brush each time as we're mixing these colors, but we got to do it. And then, you can paint your paper towel a little bit to make sure that the paintbrush is clear. And if there's any color coming off of the paintbrush on your paper towel, then you didn't get all the paint out. Then you want to clean it a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to slowly add the blue to this yellow so I can get my secondary green. And because this is a darker blue, it's already kind of coming out a little bit of a darker green. Okay, so this is maybe feeling kind of like a hunter's green or something, right? It's not necessarily like the green on the color wheel that we just looked at. But the reason why I like mixing everything that we're doing in this class with colors like this that we're using from this set is that it's gonna make it a lot easier for us to get these neutral browns to happen. These neutral browns are gonna happen very effortlessly here in just a moment, and we'll see that when we get started. And if you're using more of like a magenta and a sky blue, especially, it might be a little harder to get to these complementary colors as easily as you're going to see me doing it on screen. Okay, so let me go ahead and paint my secondary green. And then cleaning my brush again, painting the bottom of my cup without being too aggressive to my paintbrush, getting it all off, and then can see that my paintbrush is clean because my paper towel is showing up clear water whenever I paint the paper towel. So that's important because sometimes folks just keep having paint in their paintbrush and then they can't understand why their color mixing is going awry. So it could just be such a simple fix as, cleaning your paintbrush a little better between colors. Okay, so now let's make an orange. So we're mixing our yellow and our red, and I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze out some more yellow separately here. Oh my goodness, that lid just does not want to go back on there tonight. I'm just going to leave it off. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull some of this yellow off to the side again, and then believe me, it's hard for me to clean my brush in between each color. I always tell people, do as I say, not as I do with this, because sometimes I will go start contaminating all my primaries with my paintbrush because I'm just impatient as well sometimes. I'm also painting a little bit kind of off to the side. That way I can control how much red I'm adding. You can always add more of a darker color, but sometimes when we go too dark right away, it's hard to take it back. Okay, so I added a little more yellow to get to this some more secondary orange here. And I may just not label everything that we're doing here just for the sake of time, but I can go back to my other little canvas pad paper notes if anybody needs at any point. I'm just reproducing what I did over there on that other one. All right, and then now we want our violet, which, like I said, is likely going to look different than the violet that you're getting unless you're using this exact same set of paint that I had on the supply list. I mean, it's definitely going to look violet the more we mix up those colors together. We really got to get in there and mix them up. But it is definitely going to be, it's debatable what a true violet is. I feel like this one's it's skewed in a couple of different directions depending on, this dark blue really makes it feel like a a blue violet, but then when the light hits it, it feels kind of like a red violet. But like I said, it's going to make mixing our neutrals a lot easier. So that's why I chose this primary set. Okay, so there's my secondary colors. And I am just going to go ahead and label. Okay, so if you noticed, I put my secondary colors in a specific order underneath the primaries. So I put the violet underneath the yellow, I put the orange underneath the blue, and I put the green underneath the red. And that is so that my complementary colors could be together. So I'm just going to write off to the side here. Ooh, this marker. All right, so here's where I'll take a second to talk a little bit more about complementary colors. So I always like to say it's complement with an E, not with an I. So it's not like, hi, red, you're looking really nice today, said green. It's not that kind of compliment. It's complement with an E, meaning that they are opposites. And so that means they are highly contrasting, right? I said I was going to quiz y'all, but now I'm worried about our time, so I'm just going to tell you. So yeah, they're highly contrasting, which means they really enhance the way the other color looks. So if you're making a painting that has a lot of red in it and you want to really, make that red pop, put some green in the painting. If you're painting something that's very blue and you really want some high contrast and to make that blue really pop, add some orange. And if you're painting something that's very yellow and you really want to highly contrast it, then using violet would make it really pop. A lot of sports teams use these complementary colors as their colors, for the uniforms. And that's because they are so highly contrasting and they stand out so much. So the Miami Dolphins use orange and blue. I think it's LSU. Somebody told me the other day uses yellow and violet. I am not a sports fan if that's coming across. So yeah, they're very highly contrasting. They enhance each other and they are opposites on the color wheel. So it's debatable about how well they look together. It really just depends on what you're trying to do in your painting. I think they can definitely look really nice together. Obviously red and green, we use those around the holidays. But I'm not really dressing in red and green or putting those together, when I'm putting an outfit together very often. But I do think when I'm painting, doing orange and blue is a combination I use quite a bit. Okay, so let's talk about the other magical thing that happens when we mix these secondary colors together. And I'm going to actually pull out a piece of scratch paper for this and just make some notes with you. So the other magical thing that occurs when with these oh my gosh, sorry y'all, finding a pencil. With these complementary colors is when we mix them together, we can get brown. So I'm just going to write them down again for us real quick. So we've got our primary and then our secondary. So, and then these are the complements. So red and green, when we mix those together, we get a neutral. They neutralize each other. All right, when we mix together yellow and violet, we get a neutral. They neutralize each other. We're going to get a neutral brown. And then when we mix together our blue and our orange, we're going to get a neutral brown. But the neutral brown that we're going to get is going to be a little bit different each time, depending on the secondary color usually, or also sometimes the primary as well. Let's say we're mixing together red and green, but our green had more blue than yellow in it. When the blue and the red mix together, they're going to end up looking kind of violet. So that may be kind of a neutral violet, but it's not going to be like that kind of medium chocolatey brown that we might be looking for. So if we were doing that and we get kind of a violety brown, that's not necessarily wrong, right? I like to say there's no such thing as a wrong color. There's just the color we don't need right now. So if we're trying to mix up a chocolatey brown and we mix together red and green and we get kind of a violety brown, we want to take a little note in our sketchbook and say how we got there and keep track of all the colors that we're mixing as we go along on our journey, because we may want that color later and we may want to refer back to our notes and see how we got there. Okay, so let's start doing that now. We're going to start with our red and our green, and we're going to mix up try to mix up a medium neutral brown. So we're trying to create this little page here, and we're looking for our neutral browns, and we can see they're going to be slightly different depending on each primary and secondary that we mix together. Okay, so let's start with our red and green. I'm going to take some of my red off to the side again. I might even just go ahead and pull out another palette. And then clean my brush. You may notice that your water is already brown like mine now. So we've already neutralized our colors probably in our water cups by mixing all of these primaries together. Okay, so I've got my red and my green. I'm gonna start to mix those together. And I got this very nice brown to happen right away. So I told y'all that's why I like using this particular set of primaries. But it maybe did not happen so fast for you. You maybe are going to have this kind of push and pull between, if you've got, a different set of primary colors, it may take a while to get like a very neutral brown to happen. So let's say your brown is looking super red, then you would want to add more green. If it's looking super violet, you would want to add some yellow. If it's looking super orangey, you might add some blue. So you just kind of have this push and pull between these complements until you hit a neutral brown. Okay, now I'm going to start with my blue and then add orange. And by the way, taking notes on all of these little swatches that you got and saying which particular colors you mix to get them is a great idea. Highly recommend that you do that you keep those notes, because it seems like you'll never want that color. And, I always joke, it's like you mix up all this color and you're like, oh, I don't want this color. They're like, this color is trash. And then it's like, yeah, but later down the road, you might be painting, like a canyon vista or something, or like some particular, it's amazing how different colors show up in a lot of different ways. And there's really, like I said, no such thing as a wrong color. There's just the color we don't need right now. Okay, so this orange and blue is definitely giving me a different kind of brown right away. I ended up mixing up all of my little pile of orange with my blue to try to neutralize it a little bit more. All right, that looks pretty good. It's definitely on the green side, but we're gonna just roll with what we got because yeah, this kind of greenish brown is a very nice earthy and also earthy brown that we could want for a lot of different reasons. And also it looks so different when we paint a swatch of it than it does on the palette. So that's why we always want to paint a little swatch and take those notes. All right, now let's try our yellow and our violet. And by the way, we did have a class that went a little, well, I don't know if it went farther, definitely just as far as we're going right now, but it was in regards to skin tones. And Chanel has that class. She can drop that into the chat for you. It was last year around this time, I feel like, and yeah, it was all about mixing skin tones. Actually, I think it was a little bit earlier in the year last year. Anyway, point being, mixing up these complements will give you a lot of really nice, you know, earthy neutral browns, but those are also the same sort of hues that we're going to want when we're mixing skin tones. So complements are your friend when you're mixing up skin tones, and that class goes into this just as much. And yeah, I basically talked all about color theory briefly in that class as well, but not using a color wheel, just painting swatches on the paper, which is just as useful here. Okay, so let's mix our yellow and our violet together. I think I'm going to just use some yellow and this entire pile of violet that I have here. Right, and I got a nice rich brown to happen again. So there's definitely something to be said for these particular primaries. Not all paint brand primaries are going to be the same. They're just not. One thing you can do though that can really help you if you're just really puzzling over this when you get a new set of paints is just look up on the paint brand's website and see where you can find that information. Like some brands may not even have a set that says primary red, primary yellow, primary blue, like the Golden brand. You might be really confused, but if you go on their website or you search, you know, online enough, you may find some information where they'll suggest, you know, which of their reds, which of their blues, and which of their yellows can be used as a primary palette. So you might have to do a little extra research across certain brands, but it's definitely worth it because, you know, that's just, you know, more hours that you're logging in your journey to fully understand color theory. Okay, so these are our neutral browns by mixing together our primary and our secondary. Now we're going to add just more of the complements to them and see what happens. Okay, so we started out with just, you know, pretty basic mixing there of the yellow and the violet that we had here. But now let's see what happens when we add even more yellow and violet to this neutral brown. We're just gonna deepen the color just a little bit here. Okay, so I had this brown right here, which I kind of ran out of already. Let me see if I can even mix in some red to that a little bit. Okay, so let's try just adding a little more red. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. That was, well, yeah, that violet had some red in it, right? But no, that is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to add more violet to it. So let me add a little bit of blue. I ran out of my violet. So I'm taking that neutral that I got from adding my yellow and my violet, and I'm just adding more violet to it. First I added some red, and now I'm adding some blue. I'm gonna add some yellow to it. So I'm kind of just mixing all of my primary colors again here, but I'm ending up with just a richer version of that same color. It's going to deepen it. It's going to make it an even deeper brown. So let's say the brown that you make is not quite dark enough. You can just keep balancing it out with those same complements. So I just added more violet and then more yellow, and then I got this really deep chocolatey brown to happen. Okay, let's do the same thing with the orange and the blue. So, okay, yeah, it was this one. That was the orange and the blue brown. So first, let me just make my orange off to the side. Okay, so I'm adding more orange to that. And then I'm adding more blue to it. And again, it's kind of just another way for you to investigate this color a little deeper and to start to see how, just one color can affect another so much, and how adding even more of those same colors, can deepen and enrich the color even more. So we're just investigating our complements here. All right, and then the red and the green. That was this brown. So I'm gonna add red to it. And you could maybe even paint a swatch of it when you add red to it and see what happens, and then add the green and see what happens. I'm just doing it all at once, really, just to save some time. Okay, so that gives me my red kind of took over there a little bit, I think. It gave me a very canyony red. So you can see how mixing up these different complements are going to give you slightly different neutral browns. And that's important because, it really depends on where you're trying to land with your complements, on which or where you're trying to land with your neutrals, how you'll go about getting there. All right, before we run out of time, I just want to do one last thing while we already have these colors mixed up, and that is to add a little bit of white to each one, which is something in that skin tone class we've definitely played around with a lot more to try to get, paler skin tones to happen. So we can see what happens when we slowly introduce some white to each of these. So it might be better to start with white and then slowly add these, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to go ahead and add white to each one, just a tiny bit. I'm not adding much, just to see what that does. White is not always necessarily the paint that you want to add when you're trying to lighten something. I always will say with students to try to lighten it in other ways, like using a different primary, for example, to try to lighten something. Like, just to give you more of an example, I was mixing up a green with a private lesson student recently, and they were struggling to get the green that they were looking for, and they kept wanting to add white. And I said, no, let's try it with, a different yellow and a different blue. And we got to the green that they were looking for easier than if we had, just added white. We would have ended up with like a minty version of that. So, and I am aware that we are almost out of time, but I'm just going to go ahead and do this one more thing. So this is adding to the neutral brown using the yellow and the violet. And then one more, just cleaning my brush in between each one. This is the orange and blue complement mixture here, the neutral. Oh, that one has dried up quite a bit. Oh no, here it is, here it is. I had to mix some more off to the side, y'all. Here it is with a little bit of white added to it. Okay. So this was our neutral browns. This was the same thing plus more complements. And this was adding white to that same mixture. All right, I told y'all that this would be very time consuming. So we got about halfway through our page of notes tonight, and next week we will practice making our own black. We will create a value scale using just black and white, and then we'll do one using a hue in the center, and then we'll mix up some pastels together. So that will be next week's class, and it will be equally surprising how much time will fly with that one, because color theory is a lot, and it takes a lot of practice and a lot of time. And it has taken me years to, fully understand all of this. And I still don't fully understand it. I'm still constantly learning when it comes to color theory. So, it's something that I think it will take a lifetime for me to feel like I have fully mastered. But thank you all so much. And usually I have folks hold up their examples at the end of the class. We have 1 minute if anybody wants to hold up their neutral tones and their secondaries that they mixed. I'd love to see some of the neutral tones that you all got. We could spotlight you for just a quick second. All right, very nice. And I love that you're taking notes off to the side. I saw a couple questions come in. Hopefully you'll come back for class number 2, and we can answer those questions, because we'll have a whole nother hour to continue with this in part 2. Thank you all so much. And if you didn't get a chance to share your page of notes and you want to share them with me, you can always share them on Instagram and tag me. I'm at Adrian Hodge Art. It's there in the description of the class, and hashtag Make It With Michaels or Michaels classes. Thank you all so much, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.